Alrighty, we'll get started. Uh, so today is going to be a little bit. This sounds really loud. Like my goodness. Uh, Today is going to be a little bit more laid back. The last few weeks, you guys spent 3 weeks on AI. Last week we talked about cremation and the Bible. So today we're going to be a little bit more laid back. There's no handouts. You're just going to listen. I feel like I am super loud. My goodness. I'm just gonna have to whisper this whole time. So we're gonna look at a lot of. I've been in a picture mood. I don't know why. So we're gonna look at a lot of pictures. We're gonna look at one story if we have time. We're gonna look at a second story. But I have like 30 some pictures. We're gonna focus on the region of Galilee. One of the things it's just hard for us. And it's not in any way, shape, or form, I think, our fault. It's just a reality of being a 21st century Christian in America is we forget the importance of geography in stories, right? It's like if you tell me, now I have a little bit of understanding, but it's like when I first got here, you told me a story of South Dakota, and you start naming cities. If they weren't Sioux Falls or Rapid or Aberdeen, I was like, these cities mean nothing to me, For the story is important, right? Because you know the geography, you know what was happening there, so it all made sense. And it's kind of the same way. Or it's like me talking about cities in Michigan. For me, it makes sense to close. I can tell you, for you it'd be like, yeah, those are just cities, pastor. And we sometimes get like this with the Bible, just because we're not around that area, right? We didn't grow up there. But geography plays an important part. An example of this would be in the story of Joseph. Joseph goes to look at his brothers in one place. He can't find them, and then he leaves, and he finds them in a different place. The importance of that is where he finds his brothers is right next to a road. Now, remember, there's only like 2 major highways to go through Israel. Now my thing's dead. Nope. And they must have turned it down. That's what they did. Yep. The importance there we see is that as he moves to find his brothers, he actually moves closer to the road. So when they throw him in the pit, it makes sense when the traders are passing by, right? If you're an Israelite, you would just know that naturally. Oh, he's right next to the road. That makes sense. For us, we just don't think that way because we just don't know these things. And so geography plays an important part just within the Bible. Now, do you need to know geography to be saved? The answer is obviously no, but it's just kind of nice. That helps our understanding. And so we're just going to look at pictures, look at geography, and we're just going to focus today on the region of Galilee. Some of this will be review, some of it might be new, but that's where we're going to be looking today. Alrighty. So here's the Sea of Galilee. From the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River flows down to eventually the Dead Sea. So you can see where Nazareth is. You can see where Cana is. Some important cities. Megiddo, if you remember, that comes from Armageddon. You think of Armageddon, that comes from Megiddo, because and then Har means mountain in Hebrew. If you the Hebrews, and you get this even in the New Testament, if you want to make something more important, you just throw mountain in front of it. And so Armageddon is, Mount Megiddo. That's literally what it means. Armageddon means Mount Megiddo. And so we see this here. The Jezreel Valley plays an important role in the Old Testament. I've shown pictures there before. Ray asked, why is Megiddo associated with destruction? So in archaeology, and I think I've mentioned this before, there's tells, and each tell is kind of like a new layer. So sometimes as they do archaeology in Israel, they always sometimes find out, the Philistines used to live here, and then the Israelites conquered them. Well, how did they figure that out? Well, there's a bunch of pig bones and then no pig bones. A new tell with no pig bones, right? So there's tells. Most ancient cities in this region is about, if it was an important city, it would be about 18 tells as they go down, about 18 layers. Megiddo has 27. And so it was often conquered, destroyed, built back up, those kinds of things. Now, talking about, I lost my train of thought. Not geology. Oh, my goodness gracious. Archaeology, thank you. Archaeology, and just knowing the geography. One of the roads through the Jezreel Valley runs through Megiddo. So Megiddo is an important place simply because it's one of the main accesses to the roads through there. So if you want to conquer the road or have access to the road, you must get past Megiddo. So Megiddo is this giant fortress there. And then within this region, you get, who's the king? The last good king. I can't think of his name now. Josiah. Josiah dies fighting with the Egyptians up here. So he dies up by Megiddo. The region of Jezreel Valley is a beautiful, fertile area that's filled with blood. You think of like Elijah, the prophets of Baal, right? He kills them all. That would be the Jezreel Valley. Josiah dies in the Jezreel Valley. So a lot of the stories that take place in the Jezreel Valley and Megiddo are all filled with bloodshed. So that's part of the reason I think Armageddon is there. Yeah. So then you can see Nazareth and Cana. You can see why Jesus would go up to Cana, right next to each other. Tiberias, not important really. But Tiberias was the Roman capital of this region. So it doesn't really show up in the Bible, but that's what Tiberias is. But then we'll kind of be focusing up here and then around here as well. So Magdala, who's from Magdala? Good. Mary Magdalene. Yeah, Mary of Magdala. Yeah. So Magdalene is just where she's from. Yeah. So Mary Magdalene is Mary from Magdala. So over here, this is kind of interesting. So this is the Decapolis. And remember, especially once you get to the New Testament, names tell us a lot of information, right? So what is just, without even maybe knowing anything, what does Decapolis probably tell you about this region? What was that? So 10 cities, good, right? Because that's what it means. So 10 cities. And what is it in? So the answer is simple. You're overthinking it. It's Greek, right? So 10 cities, right? It's Greek, which means over here is, guess what? Greek. So you get a lot of Greeks over here. So usually anytime Jesus sails across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, so think of the story of the pigs, right? The man who's possessed by a legion of demons, and he casts them into the pigs. Well, the question is, why is there pigs on this side of the Sea of Galilee? Right? They're Jews. They shouldn't be pigs. Well, the answer is because it's the region of the Decapolis. It's Greek over here for the most part. So especially in the New Testament, names really clue us into usually whether or not are they Jewish, they're Greek, they're Roman. Names really kind of help us kind of understand these things. Alrighty, so here's the first picture. We don't spend too much time on it. What's interesting, this is the southern part. It would be like right here. I mean, it's not a great picture. And so right here would be the Jordan River flowing. But you can kind of see, hopefully, you can see the mountains in the background. It'll be easier. But you can see how hilly it is around here. Right, so this is the Jezreel Valley. As you get closer, there's going to be hills because it's a valley. So, when I went to California, I was surprised by all the hills. And as my brother pointed out, we shouldn't be because everything's built in valleys. So if there's a valley, you're going to have hills on either side. So, alrighty. So these next pictures, this will be like right around like here. It's a place called, I just lost it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't show up in the Bible. I didn't get it. Anyway, it doesn't show up in the Bible. But it's an interesting place because you kind of just need to know the history of the region to kind of understand some things. This part of Israel is a hotbed for zealots. Zealots really grew up in this area. And so in 5 BC, the Romans have a census, and you have a rebellion at Tiberias. A bunch of people rebel at Tiberias, and they get slaughtered instead. If you were in my Acts Bible study, what's his name makes an allusion to this. If you turn to Acts chapter 5, I want to say. Turn to Acts 5. Yes, Acts 5. Gamaliel, that's his name. Acts 5, we'll begin at verse 33. Context of Acts 5, this is after the disciples are arrested, and they're deciding what to do with them. So if you remember, the apostles are arrested. They're then freed in the middle of the night, and they're like, where did the apostles go? And they're like, oh yeah, they're still out there preaching. So then they invite the apostles to come before the Sanhedrin, and they're debating what to do. So verse 33, you get Gamaliel. And Gamaliel is a famous Pharisee. Paul is a disciple of Gamaliel. So Paul's a disciple of him. But this is what Gamaliel has to say. So verse 33, when they heard this, they were enraged and wanted to kill them. But a Pharisee in the council named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law held in honor by all the people, stood up and gave orders to put the men outside for a little while. And he said to them, men of Israel, take care what you are about to do with these men. For before these days, Thaddeus rose up, claiming to be somebody, and a number of men, about 400, joined him. He was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and came to nothing. After him, Judas the Galilean rose up. So first Thaddeus, he's the one that won against Tiberias, the city of Tiberias here. He rose with 400 men. He was killed, dispersed, nothing came of him. After Judas, this would be about 5 or 6 AD, so about 10 years later, Judas the Galilean rose up in those days of the census and drew away some of the people after him. He too perished, and all who followed him were scattered. So what we see, even by Gamaliel talking, is this region of Galilee is a hotbed for, they're called Zechariah, of radicals, of zealots. So this region is very hotbed of zealots, of radicals, and Gamaliel even makes an allusion to these things as he's deciding what to do with the disciples. He's saying, hey, some of these people have risen up before, claiming to be somebody. They were defeated, conquered, nothing came of them. His point will then be, if we let this play out, this will either happen to the disciples because they're not who they claim to be and God is not with them, or it doesn't matter what we do, we may be found enemies of God, so we should let them be. But he points out to all the radicalness of this time around the region of Galilee. So this is then one of these cities that rebelled, that's known for being radical, during the Jewish rebellion in 68 AD. But first of all, you can just see very green, right? All of Israel's not like this, but very green, easily defensible. You can see still the ruins, if you can see that, kind of right around. So the story goes here, when the Romans were besieging this, the Roman general, the leader, went in to conquer the city, and somehow he ended up surrounded by the Jewish people. And he managed to fight his way back to safety, but he was so pissed that they almost killed him, he decided to sack the city. So, if you're going to surround a Roman general, you better kill him. And so this is just, once again, the region of Galilee. The city also goes is the people here, as they fled down to Capernaum. Capernaum closed their gates and wouldn't let these people in. Because they didn't want to be associated with them, unless they too might be conquered. So even within this region of Galilee, not everyone thinks the same. But this is then important, right? Think about the Beatitudes, right? So the Sermon on the Mount is in the region of Galilee, and right as Jesus say, "Blessed are the peacemakers," right? Why is Jesus saying this? Well, part of the reason is, besides it being true, obviously, is where is he? Well, he's in this region that's known for not being very peaceful, right? That's known to, kill and insurrect. And he's saying, no, blessed are the peacemakers, right? So geography plays an important part of this. Where does Jesus say what he says? And where is he? This is an important part. Alrighty, so this next part, we're in Dan. I should have really had more maps. So Dan, we see we're all the way up here. And then we'll look at Caesarea Philippi. So this is Dan, ancient city of Dan. This is actually the post for the gate, all the way back to the Old Testament. So the gate would have stood right there. So you would have had that. So it's very old, thousands of years old. So this is the entrance. So there's another gate over here, and you would have walked in. There's another gate here. So you would have had 2 gates. You can see still some of the pillars standing up. But this is very common in the Old Testament time. A lot of these ruins, you'll see stuff like this. There would be rooms in each side of this. Very common. So Dan is also famous. If you're a Old Testament king and you have now the divided kingdom, you have the kingdom in the north and the kingdom in the south, one of the biggest issues is people want to go to Jerusalem. And why do they want to go to Jerusalem? What? Good, the temple, right? Because what do you do at the temple? You pray, but you can pray other places. Sacrifice, good, sacrifice, which would be worship, but worship through sacrificing. So you're in the northern kingdom. Jerusalem is in the southern kingdom where the altar is, where you make sacrifices, because there's only one place supposed to be for the altars, that's in Jerusalem. You have a problem. You don't want people to go into the other place, right? So he sets up, the king of Israel sets up 2 altars, one in Bethel, which is southern part. I'll point that out once we get to our map. And this one in Dan. So the northern part and the southern part. This way, they don't have to go to Jerusalem. So this is a replica. But this is basically how big it would have been in the time. You can still see the ruins, the steps up, leading up to the altar right here. You can see this part around the altar, but this is in Dan. So you have this altar that you have in Dan. This is a reconstruction of what they thought, the outside would have looked like. Who knows? But you can kind of maybe help you picture it a little bit more. So that's Dan. We don't have too many pictures of Dan. Then we get to Caesarea Philippi. And Caesarea Philippi it's a place. It's demonic. We'll put it that way. It's demonic. And I'll share with you why. But first, once again, notice, this is beautiful. I have another picture that I didn't put in here. Absolutely. Especially compared to the rest of Israel. Just beautiful. Right? You have these trees overgrowing. You don't have a lot of trees in Israel. So when you get a place like this, just gorgeous. And so this is looking at our pathway, and once again, you just see how beautiful this place is. Here's some of the ruins. You can kind of see once again just the engravement in some of these things. So why Caesarea Philippi? What's important here? A couple of things. First, Caesarea Philippi is very pagan. It's as pagan as you're going to get. So first we have this temple to Augustus, right? So you have a temple to the Caesar. And then there's a grotto to the god Pan, which we'll get to. This is the court of Pan. Oh, that's the court of Pan. Over here is the temple to Zeus then. So this is right in the region of Galilee, right? So, you have these pagan worshipers right next to basically Jewish people, right next to it. And then over here, this is where we get really just demonic. You get the court of Nemesis and the tomb of the sacred goats. So Pan, if you don't know, is he's a satyr, so half goat, half man. So to worship Pan, what you would do, they would practice bestiality with goats. And then once they were done, they would sacrifice the goats to Pan. So that's Caesarea Philippi. You have a temple to Caesar, you have a temple to Zeus, and you practice bestiality. And that's Caesarea Philippi. And like I said, it's very close to Dan and to the rest of, it's as pagan as you can get. Here's some more pictures. What story takes place at Caesarea Philippi? Ray, you can't answer. You all know the story. Transfiguration takes place right next to it, where Peter proclaims, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So in the midst of what is basically paganism and demonic worship, you have Peter confessing who Jesus is, that he is the Son of God. You'll notice when you talk about it, Jesus, they withdrew to the region of Caesarea Philippi. So it's really cool in the midst of darkness and spiritual warfare. You have Peter proclaiming who Christ is, which is very cool. And so once again, you can see just some of these ruins. There probably would have been a statue up here to Pan, and then you would have more over here. Over here would have been the grotto to the goats. And if we flip around here, the temple of Caesar's temple would have been right here. Zeus's temple would have been right here. But that's Caesarea Philippi. Not to be confused with Caesarea Maritima, which is on the coast. So Caesarea Maritima, that's like where Paul is in prison for 2 years or arrested for 2 years. That Caesarea Maritima shows up in Acts quite a bit, not to be confused with Caesarea Philippi. Here's another picture of it. You can see the tomb temple of the sacred goats. So the last place we're going to look for these three, because we looked at Dan, now Caesarea Philippi, and this place is called Omrit. O-M-R-I-T, Omrit. Herod built 3 temples to Caesar. One of them was in Caesarea Maritima, and one of them's here at Omrit. Omrit was interesting to get to because there's a path, and then there's a fence, and it says, don't leave the fence, there's mines. So I chose not to leave the path. Yes. Yeah. But this is one of those temples. You can obviously see it's in ruins. But this is Omrit. There's some pictures there. This is the steps leading up. You can once again see the columns. And remember, all of these would have been colored. No one likes to just look at white. All of this would have been colored and everything else. So why do I bring these 3 up? Dan, Omrit, and Caesarea Philippi. To compare and contrast, for 2 reasons. Compare and contrast what we call the triangle of darkness. So Dan, Omrit, and Caesarea Philippi, compared to what we call the evangelical triangle. So the evangelical triangle is Capernaum, which we'll look at in a little bit, Chorazin, and Bethsaida. So that triangle right there, we call the evangelical triangle, because like 80% of Jesus' ministry is within that triangle, which is not very big. It's a few square miles. So we call that the evangelical triangle. Now compared to Dan, which is up here, Caesarea Philippi, then Omrit would be like right there. So you get the little triangle up there. We compare and contrast. And the question is, why? Why do we call the one triangle of darkness? Well, Caesarea Philippi makes sense. Why do we call the other 2? Well, Omrit kind of makes sense, right? But why Dan? Dan is a tribe, right? So why do we include Dan into the triangle of darkness? So here, in this map, is the 12 tribes of Judah according to Judges. So Joshua. According to Joshua, where they're supposed to take land. Now, if we focus on the region of Galilee, there's at least 2 things that stand out to me. But what stands out to you when we look at the tribes' allotment and the region of Galilee? Oh, so size, right? It's big, yeah. So it's where the northern kingdom would have been. Good. That plays an important part. What about the city of Dan? So we see the city of Dan all the way up here. Or I said I would point out, Bethel is right here. Where all the other altar was built, Bethel's right here. So fairly close to Jerusalem. Remember, the southern kingdom is Benjamin and Judah, and then everybody else is in the northern kingdom. So we have Dan up here. So what does that tell you right off the bat? Well, they're so far away from the rest of them. Where's Dan supposed to be? Right here. Where did Dan end up? Right here. What does that tell you about the tribe of Dan? Deviance. God says, this is your land. Dan says, this land looks better. I'm going to go up there. That's what Dan does. And on their way up, as they travel up to what's supposed to be their brother's land, right, Naphtali, on their way up, they take a priest who is worshiping idols and bring that priest with them. So on their way up, as they forsake God's, law to kick these people out and be here, they start worshiping idols on their way up with a priest they find. Yeah. So that's the tribe of Dan. Then you get the altar built in Dan. Guess which tribe is the first one to be taken into captivity and never come back? Dan. Guess which tribe is not listed in Revelation? Dan. Revelation 7, when you get the list of, all the tribes. Dan is not there. Well, the 10 tribes are lost, so who knows? We don't know. History shows with Dan, probably not. So that's Dan. Then you get Asher over here. And this might be really hard to see. What are the two cities that are listed with Asher in the north? Tyre and Sidon. So Tyre and Sidon. Whose cities are there? Those? Starts with a P. Nope. That's a good guess. Phoenicians. This is a little tricky question because it's PH. Phoenicians. And remember, Phoenicians are present-day Lebanon. Pretty much actually the same. Like, they can basically trace their lineage back to the Phoenicians. So they haven't moved. Anybody know who's the most famous from Sidon? You all know them. This person. Jezebel. She's a Sidonese princess. So notice then, even up here, Asher doesn't control basically any of the land anyway. You see this a lot of the places. So you see then over here, then Naphtali, Asher, Dan, none of them really do what they're supposed to be doing. This will be important. And then you get Zebulon over here. They get a little bit of land. How God decided to do some of these, I don't know. Poor Zebulon. They don't even get water access. I guess they get good land, though. They're by Megiddo. They get good land. So this is what we do. This is why we call Dan part of the triangle of darkness. Because Dan is a rebellious tribe. They seem to have rebelled the whole time. Which is important then, because then we get to Isaiah 9. So let's turn to Isaiah 9. All of this had a reason. And these are verses you know. These are verses you know. I'm hoping this context of understanding geography and history will help you understand these verses maybe a little bit better, or make them more meaningful. So Isaiah 9, famous Christmas prophecy. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into content the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. Right? So Zebulun and Naphtali. What does it mean to bring it into contempt? Yeah, he punishes them. Right? It makes it bad. Right? He brings them into contempt, bad things. In the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter times, he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shined. You have multiplied the nation, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you, as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. Right? So what's Isaiah prophesying? Right? He's saying this land right here, where Jesus does most of his ministry, where in the New Testament is a land of darkness. Right? And this is part of the reason why those in Jerusalem don't think good Jews live up here. Who lives up here? Right? You have the tribe of Dan that was taken and never coming back. They were the first ones punished. You have all of these Greek cities that worship Greek gods, that worship Pan. Who lives up here? It's a place of darkness. And the answer is, who goes there? The answer is Christ. Christ goes there. Right? He doesn't go where you would expect him to in Jerusalem, though he does spend some of his ministry there. But he goes to the land of darkness. And on them a light has shined. You see how geography begins to play a role in this? What's Isaiah saying? Even though these things are happening now, something even better will happen. Christ will redeem this area when he comes. Right? So where does God go? He goes to the broken, the sinners, where you would not expect him to the darkness, to prophesy, to teach, to redeem, to heal. So Isaiah 9 is very much rooted in the geography, the history of Israel. It's a wonderful passage, even if you don't know it. I think it just adds so much more to the meaning. What is God doing? He's redeeming, right? He's redeeming an area that is very much broken and captured by sin. That's where he is. It shows us once again who can anyone, is the love of Christ too much for anyone? The answer is no, right? Can people still reject him? The answer is yes. But we shouldn't simply withhold the gospel because of what people have done in the past, right? Yeah, exactly. That's when they need it. This is what Christ does. So that would be Capernaum, Chorazin, and then Bethsaida. Those three right there. Yeah, the north side. Yep. So. But, well, we'll get there. But best guess, he's probably going to like Capernaum to like Bethsaida. He's probably just going like this. He's not probably going all the way across. Though he might sometimes, but just going across. But I'll have the dimensions in a little bit. Yep. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead. So Ukraine would not be. Gaza would be like right down here. In fact, you can see the city Gaza. Rich, let's see. Who's the most famous person from Gaza? Right, you shouldn't answer. Goliath, right? Goliath. Actually, I'm sorry. Goliath is from Gath. That's my fault, which is right here. But you can see Gaza, right? So Gaza would be like right here in modern day. Ukraine would be like over here. Oh, like up there. Yeah. It's way north. Ukraine is way north, yeah. But yeah, Gaza would be kind of in this part right here. Yeah, so you would get the, because you get like Jerusalem and then West Bank would be over here. Yeah. So even, well, it's, you get weird partition. Even like Bethlehem is in the part of like the West Bank and stuff. And Bethlehem's right here. So even that's in like West Bank territory and stuff. Because they made sure we had our passports anytime we went there, like to Bethlehem. So, anything else? Alrighty, so back to the Sea of Galilee then, we'll focus on the Sea of Galilee and Capernaum here now. So down here is Magdala. So that's Magdala. Over here would be like Capernaum, and then you got Chorazin back here, and then over here would be like Bethsaida. But you can see it's not very big. I know I've told this before, but on the way up here, I was sleeping, and then we got off the bus. I'm like, where are we going? Whatever. I just started walking, and we get to the top of this. I'm like, whoa, that's a nice lake, and and they're like, no, that's the Sea of Galilee. I was severely disappointed. I'm like, that's a sea? I'm like, come on. I grew up by the Great Lakes. I mean, at the most, it's a lake. It's a big pond, but it's not a sea. It's the Sea of Galilee. Severely disappointing to me in the moment. No, this is freshwater. Which, I do have that, yeah. Yeah, I have a picture of a boat. Yeah. Yeah, so you would have the Sea of Gennesaret, Lake Tiberias, Sea of Galilee. Yeah, and went by a lot of different names, even in the New Testament. Right? And remember, Tiberias is right here. Yep. So the Romans might have called it Lake Tiberias, right? Yep. So why is it called sea? I don't know. All I know is it's a big pond or a lake. Definitely not a sea. But that's Magdala, so right, Mary Magdalene would be here. So this is where Jesus spent most of his ministry, is in this region. So here's the overhead of the Sea of Galilee. You can tell it's taken at two different times because this is very green, and this is not. But you can see it's not very big. Here's some more pictures. You can see this is the southern part leading back this way. And just notice the hills, right? There's a bunch of hills around it. And so once again, and there used to be, I don't remember the name of the city anymore. There used to be a city right over here. And so when Jesus once again talks about, like a city set up on a hill for all to see, as he's teaching this, you can imagine them all just looking, because there's a city set up on a hill right over there. Right? So Jesus is using an example that they all can see. They all know. Yeah. So here's a much lower level. I think this will be around here. I'll have a few in the south. I'm a few over here by Capernaum, and then I have one on the other side. So you can see the other side. It's fairly calm. I was really hoping there would be a storm when I was there. When we were there for like 3 days, there was no storm. You can see a boat there. But once again, notice all the hills, which then the story of the pigs makes sense as well, right, as they run off the cliff. Because there's cliffs all over the place. This is where I ate, right on the Sea of Galilee. This is all the way on the other side. So Magdala would be right here. Then you would have Capernaum over here, and then I think those were banana trees or something. And this is right on the bottom, right by the Sea of Galilee. So over here would have been, this is the far way, you can see, because you can't really see the land. Here's a first century boat they found. So they found this boat. They had a drought. Oops, hit the wrong button. There we go. Had a drought, and they ended up finding this boat, and it's back to the first century. There's a reconstruction of this, so you're like, what does the boat actually look like? But this is cool, because, you can picture, it's not very big. Remember, the average height of a Palestinian male was 5'2". So they're not very tall people. So you can fit quite a few people on a smaller ship, unlike today, right? Here's a reconstruction of what most ships would have looked like. Now, obviously, there at least would be a place to sleep, because we know Jesus slept in one of the storms. They go to wake him up. But not very big ships. So the Sea of Galilee, it's 64 square miles. I also have it actually in dimensions of miles, though. In case you don't know what 64 square miles is, it's about the size of Washington, D.C. So you can fit all of Washington, D.C. in the Sea of Galilee. Yeah. If you still don't know what that means, it's 13 by 8 miles. That might be a little bit more helpful. So at its length, it's 13, and then at its widest, it's 8 miles. That's at its longest and at its widest. So some of the other parts are much more close together. So not big, 13 by 8. It is, as we pointed out, freshwater. So what happens is you get the mountains in the north, and so the mountains you get snow or rain, and then it falls back down into the Sea of Galilee. No, because then the Jordan River flows down to the Dead Sea. Does it flow up? I didn't think so, because it's the lowest freshwater lake on Earth, second lowest in the world, only to the Dead Sea. So the Jordan flows between the two. So it at least makes sense to me that it would flow down to the Dead Sea. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm only a historian and a pastor. I don't know. It's a good question. First, it does get quite deep, 157 feet. So in the middle of it, it does go quite low. And since it's so low, what happens is from the mountains, you get storms that come out of nowhere. Since it is so low, they just kind of come down and come out of nowhere. Which is why the disciples, fishermen in the Sea of Galilee, right, they're experienced fishermen, get caught up in storms all the time. You're like, how, as experienced fishermen, who's only fish basically on this lake or this sea, are you always caught in storms? And the answer is because they seemingly come out of nowhere. The second lowest then only to the Dead Sea. So this results in tropical storms coming out of nowhere. So this is what you get. So they fish sardines. Sardines were big here. You get tilapia as well. So it was a very big fishing community. They would fish and then salt them and then send them out to the Romans. That's how they made money here, was through fishing. Sardines, tilapia were the big two. And then I think the region of Magdala, they had salt there. So they were able to do all of these things. So that's why you also get a lot of fishermen there. Any questions about that? And I talked about this already, the dynamic between the Jews in Galilee and the Jews in Jerusalem, right? You get this kind of dynamic between the two of them. Probably, yeah, for the most part. And you get a lot more Pharisees in the north than you do in the south. But yeah, no good Jew would come from the south, from the north. You even get, Nathaniel says this, and he's in this region, but Nathaniel even says, what good thing comes out of Nazareth? Like, that kind of shows you the thought process a little bit of, what good things come out from the north? People don't expect much. Yeah. Like I said, you're much more surrounded by, you have the Decapolis on one side, you have pagan worship in the north, you have the history just of the region in general. Yeah. So, and yet a lot of the disciples come from Galilee, not all of them, but a lot of them do. Jesus spends his time in Galilee, so we see this, right? Once again, God works in ways we would not expect him to work, right? So, still does, yeah, absolutely, yep. Yeah, I'll skip a few. Yeah, so this is on the Sea of Galilee. It would be like someplace up here. Once again, remember mountains. Don't think of like the Rockies for mountains. Mountains are bigger hills. Or if you want to add some importance to it, you name it a mount. Right, so the Sermon on the Mount would probably just be on a hill up here someplace. Yeah. So don't think huge mountains. So yeah, someplace around here. Just somewhere, right here. Crowd was following him, sat down, and began to teach. Now, if you go to Israel, they'll tell you this is where the Sermon on the Mount took place, but you don't know that. You don't know that. Elijah? I don't know. Oh, well, like Mount Carmel, you can kind of get to. Mount Carmel, you can. Some of these places, so they do this with Garden of Gethsemane. They're like, this is where the Garden of Gethsemane is, and here's a chapel. You know where we don't know where the Garden of Gethsemane is. Like, we can guess. It's in this area. So they do this all the time with these kinds of things. Like this is, actually the leader of this was a long time ago, was Constantine's mother. So Constantine, he was the ruler and came to power in 312. He's the one that made Christianity legal. His mom was a Christian and he wasn't. Now the debate is, did he convert? Anyway, his mom was a Christian. So after he became emperor and won the Civil War, his mom went back to Israel and started finding all these places. So she was the big ones, like, this is where it happened. Well, we don't know. So you get that all over the place in Israel. In Israel, you also, when I went to Nazareth, they're like, this is where they ran him out of the city. Like, ran him up to the cliff. You're like, you look around, there's all these cliffs. Like, we have no idea if this is the one. Especially since Nazareth in the time of Jesus was 100 people, and now it's a city of 75,000. Like, we have no idea. Could be. It could be. But, yeah. So this is Capernaum. So we have a lot of stories in Capernaum. So you can see the ruins around. Once again, and this is what they do. It always frustrates me because they think this is where Peter lived, and so they built a chapel on top of it, a church on top of it. I'm like, I'd rather just see where Peter lives. Like, we blame the Catholics. They're the main culprits. So, but this is, we'll look at this. This is a synagogue. Not the same synagogue when Jesus was in Capernaum, because this would be they built this around the 300s. So it's older, but underneath these ruins of the synagogue, they found parts of the old synagogue. But we'll take a look at the synagogue, because it would have been in the same way for the most part as the old one. So you can see it's not very big. A lot of these roads or in between houses are very narrow. It's a very, if you don't need cars, you can build stuff a lot more close. You can build a lot more close together, right? And you're not going to worry about a big yard to take care of. You're not going to worry about these things. Everything else is more condensed then because of that. But you can see it's right on the seam. So here, once again, is the synagogue. You can see the ruins right here. A lot of these houses probably would have been about 2 stories tall. So you would have had the lower floor to cooking, stuff like that. Animals might have been there, and the upper floor is where you would have slept. Here's just another picture. Here's in it. So synagogues weren't big places, right? So this is not huge. You would have had teaching. You can see there's steps over here to sit. But it is a fairly nice place. It's a fancy place. This is 1,700 years old. Here's some of the engravings on it. You can see. I was told that I read that it's supposed to be like the Ark of the Covenant, but I don't know. I don't really see it. But you can see it's engraved. Right? It's a nice place. Obviously, somebody paid a lot of money for this. And Jesus spent a lot of time in the synagogues in Capernaum, in the synagogue at Capernaum. So once again, you can just begin to see all the ruins here. But these all would have been houses, all right next to each other. You can see how narrow the road is in between the houses, so not very big. And then it makes sense if you think about the story of the lady who had the discharge of blood that wouldn't stop for, like 10 years. And she touches Jesus' robes. Well, he's traveling in the city. Well, he's traveling in a city like this. And he says, "Who touched me?" And they're like, "Jesus." There's a lot of people here, right? Well, when you're in this narrow part, there's a lot of people that's going to be gathered right there. So it begins to make sense. So that's Capernaum. We don't have too many pictures. Like I said, over here is where they believe Peter lived and his mother. Who knows? But we have that over there. And then this, you can see. I think this right here, I could be wrong. I think this right here is the chapel to the Sermon on the Mount. So that's where they say it is right there. Once again, who knows? It could be. Probably not. So, any questions? End of Judges. Judges 17, I want to say. Joshua, Judges. Went too far. Yeah, I want to say it's around Judges 17. But it's in the book of Judges. Judges 18. This is just the beginning of Judges 18. In those days when there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the people of Dan were seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in, for until then no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and explore the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and that's from an earlier story. But they send people up, and they're like, "Hey, look, this is very nice land. It's fertile, it's green. Let's go there, live there." So, Judges 18. Alrighty, we have a little bit of time. We'll turn to Matthew 8. Matthew 8 takes place in Capernaum. So we'll read Matthew 8 as we think about Capernaum. Let's do that one. So Matthew 8, we'll begin at verse 5. When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." And he said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, truly I say to you, no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion Jesus said, go, let it be done for you as you have believed. The servant was healed at the very moment. Right, so here we see him entering Capernaum, and the centurion comes. Now the question is does the centurion live in Capernaum? We don't know, right? He could be in Tiberias. Would make sense if he was in Tiberias. It's not that far away, probably a few miles at most. But as Jesus is entering Capernaum, we have this centurion. And as we see so often in the New Testament, it is the Gentiles who have such great faith compared to the Jews. Right? We see this all the time in the book of Acts. But Mark, which we'll start in a few weeks, we see this in Mark. The people who believe are Gentiles, not Jews. And this is what we see here. The centurion has great faith. So going on. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and began to serve him. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and bore our diseases. Right, so you can maybe picture in one of these houses, right? Whether it might be here. But Peter's mother laying sick and Jesus walking in and healing her, right? One of these, not a big house. But you can maybe begin to picture it a little bit, at least as they overlook the sea, this taking place. Now, when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. A scribe came to him and said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said, Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Right? So these stories all just take place, right? So Jesus is traveling. He's going. Let's see. I'm going to pictures into our map. Right? So he's in Capernaum. So the other side, it might be over here. That would probably be the best guess. He's just going over here or to Bethsaida. Right? Because there's a river that goes this way, so they might just be sailing over to Bethsaida to the other side, which would be a few miles, not too very big. And usually it would just hug the coast along the way. So usually when he goes to the other side, it's just probably talking about bouncing between these two. And then we get the famous story. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, Save us, Lord, we are perishing. Let's have that picture. Save us, Lord, we are perishing. And he said to them, Why are you afraid, O you of little faith? And then he rose and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, What sort of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obeys him? Right? So they're in this boat, and we saw a picture of a boat. It's not very big. You can understand. You get some waves that come up on it. There's 13 of them. How quickly you might be able to sink. Yeah, right? And so you begin to see this, that out of nowhere these storms come, and they're mightily afraid of what's going to happen. Then we do see in the next verse, he's going to the country of the Gadarenes, which would be then over here. So he's probably sailing from here over to here. So if they're stuck in the middle of a storm over here, if you can't row your way out of it, you're in trouble. Yeah, it'd be scary. Yeah, absolutely, right? You can't do anything. You're at the mercy of the wind and the waves at this point as they're trying to probably bail water and all these things. And then you can understand, here's Jesus sleeping. It's like, Jesus, what are you doing? We're about to die. Yep. So you begin to hopefully maybe just picture it a little bit more, these things as they take place. Alrighty, any other questions or comments? Alrighty, like I said today, a little bit more laid back. We've had some heavy topics on the last few weeks. In September, we'll be beginning the book of Mark. I said that last week, but we'll begin Mark for the new year since we haven't done a gospel in a while. And then one announcement, I didn't make in the early service, but since some of you may know, and I didn't think about this and I should have, former President Satgast, his funeral was yesterday. He died. He was at a hospital for a visit, a routine checkup, and had a brain aneurysm and died. And so some of you might actually know Satgast. I met him and talked with him. So his funeral was actually yesterday. So keep his family in your prayers as well. Alrighty, let's close then with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.